What if the success of your entire SMSF property journey boiled down to understanding just two things? Well, for most investors, it does. But what if I told you one of these decides if you can even afford the property that you want, and the other decides if the property will actually make you money or not? Getting them wrong is the fastest way to turn a retirement dream into a compliance nightmare. Welcome to the first episode of the SMSF Property Pathway. I'm your host, the SMSF Property Guy, Jason McCall. My only goal with this show is to give you a clear, step-by-step guide to supercharging your retirement with the use of property, cutting through all the noise and the complexity that goes with it. Today, we're starting right at the beginning. We're looking at two foundational articles which you must absolutely read before you think about buying a property with your super. The first is SMSF Borrowing Capacity Lenders in 2026, which tells you how much a bank will actually give you. And the second, SMSF Buyers Agent Fees, a costs breakdown. This uncovers the true cost of getting a deal done the right way. So get these two pillars right and you're on the path to success. Get them all wrong and you're building your future in the sand. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what lenders are really looking for, and you'll know what buyers, agents, fees actually buys you. You'll have a rock solid picture of the total financial commitment. So let's get into it. Why are we starting here? Why spend a whole episode, the first episode, on just borrowing power and the costs? Because property inside a self-managed super fund isn't like buying a house in your own name. It's different. It's a completely different universe. The rules are way stricter, the stakes are way higher, and the penalties for messing up are just so severe. The Australian Tax Office, the ATO watches SMSFs like a hawk, and they're only getting more and more intense. The SMSF world is booming, but the boom brings more scrutiny. The ATO has more resources for its audits. They're looking more closely at property valuations. They're cracking down on any deal that doesn't look 100% professional and at arm's length. So on top of that, we have a major legislative changes that are now a reality. As of the 1st of July this year, the new Division 296 tax will come into effect. This law introduces a higher rate on the earnings for super balances that are over $3 million. This is a huge shift, and it means that for the first time, some funds might pay tax on the capital growth before a property is even sold. This makes knowing your fund's total value and your cost base more critical than ever. Okay, look, this journey isn't for beginners or for the faint of heart. The pathway is for the serious investor, typically that you've already built up a super balance in excess of at least 300,000, and you're looking for that next level of wealth creation. You're probably feeling like your standard super fund is just treading water. You see the property market creating wealth for others, and you're asking yourself, why can't my super do that for me? Well, it can, but only if you build on a solid foundation. And that foundation is our two pillars. First, knowing what you can realistically borrow, and secondly, knowing what will the true cost be. Everything else, finding the property, negotiating deal, managing it all, comes much later. So let's lay the foundation for that first pillar. So this brings us to the first article, I believe, every SMSF investor needs to read. The SMSF Borrowing Capacity Lenders of 2026, which is an updated version. The biggest mistake people make is thinking that borrowing for their SMSF is the same as in a personal home loan. It's so not. The whole process is governed by a special loan structure called a Limited Recourse Borrowing Arrangement, or LRBA for short. Basically, an LRBA is a loan designed to protect the other assets inside your super fund. The property is held in a separate legal structure called a bare trust. If your fund defaults on the loan, the lender can only repossess that one property. They can't touch any of the other cash or shares or other investments that you may have inside your SMSF. It's a great safety net, but it's this very limitation that makes lenders so cautious. They have less security, so they hit you with stricter rules. So how much can you really borrow? It isn't a simple online calculation. It comes down to obviously a few key things that lenders pick apart. So first up, the big one, the loan to value ratio, or LVR. This is the percentage of the property's price a bank will lend to you. With a personal home loan, you might get a 90% LVR. In an SMSF, that's rare. For a residential property, the maximum LVR is typically 80%. Through some specialist lenders are now offering up to 90% in certain situations. For commercial properties, it's often lower, sometimes capped at around 7%. So let's make that real. You want a $600,000 property at an 80% LVR, the bank lends you $480,000. Your SMSF needs the other $120,000 plus costs. But if the lender only goes to 70%, their loan drops to $420,000. Now your fund needs to find $180,000 plus costs. That's $60,000 difference. Getting this wrong means wasting months looking for a property you were never going to be able to afford. Secondly is the rental income. Lenders need to know your fund can pay that loan back. The main income source for that is obviously the rent itself. They'll look at the expected rental yield and factor it into their calculations. A property with a strong, reliable rent is obviously a much safer bet for a lender. And thirdly, you have to be ready. SMSF loans almost always have a higher interest rate than normal home loans. As of early 2026, we're seeing variable rates for residential properties starting in the mid 6% range and heading up towards 8.4 or more. Depending on the LVR and the lender, and while your home loan might be like for 30 years, that's not always the case here. Many banks fund SMSF loans can have terms of up to 30 years, but if you're using a related party loan under the ATO's Safe Harbour rules, the maximum term is just 15 years, which is a lot shorter term, which means higher repayments, which puts even more pressure on the rent to cover everything. Finally, there's what I call the 2026 twist. The ATO is laser focused on loans between an SMSF and a related party, like you lending money to your own fund. To make sure these deals are commercial, ATO sets safe harbour interest rates. For the 2025-26 financial year, the rate for property was set at 8.95%. If you use the related party loan and don't play by these rules, the ATO can declare all the income from that property, both the rent and the capital gain, to be non-arm's length income, or NARLI. The tax on NARLI is a brutal 45%, which just completely destroys any benefit of holding the asset in super. So Pillar 1 is about facing reality. It's not about what you hope you can borrow. It's about what the numbers and the lenders will actually let you borrow. You have to go with a crystal clear conservative estimate of your borrowing power. Now, let's move on to the second equally as vital pillar. So, okay, you've figured out your borrowing capacity, your fund has the deposit, time to hit that real estate sites, right? Yeah, well, no, not so fast. This is where we have to talk about the actual second article, SMSF buyer's agent fees, a cost breakdown. And honestly, the title is a bit deceptive. This pillar is really about understanding the total cost of buying and holding an SMSF property. The buyer's agent fee is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle, and a puzzle many investors don't see until it is too late. So buying an SMSF property is not a solo mission. The compliance risks are just too high. Trying to navigate the maze of LRBA rules, the single acquirable asset rule and the sole purpose test, on your own is a recipe for disaster. And this is where a team of specialists come in, and a buyer's agent is a critical player. But first, let's break down all the costs you need to budget for, because the purchase price is just the starting line. So first are the upfront costs and the purchase costs. Even before you make an offer, you're spending money. And we've got to remember that setting up an SMSF itself can cost anywhere from online from $500 to over $2,500 with a respected professional agent. Then you need a separate bare trust for the property, which will be another $800 to $1,000. Once you find a place, the transaction costs hit you like a ton of bricks. You've got stamp duty, you've got state taxes that can be anywhere between 4 and 5% of the purchase price on that $600,000 property that we talked about. That's another $24,000 to $30,000. Then there are the legal conveyancing fees, which can be anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000. And of course, building and pest inspections be another $500 to $800 as well. Then come loan establishment fees. The banks don't always work for free. You'll have application fees, you'll have valuation fees, and then the lender's own legal fees, which can add up to another $2,000 to $4,000 depending on which lender you end up using. On top of all this, there is perhaps the single best thing an SMSF investor can do at setup, and that is to get professional financial advice and planning. This cost can be anywhere between $5,000 to $6,000, and this is a cost that most people overlook. Trying to DIY or get free advice from online forums is a huge mistake, and we won't work with anyone that hasn't looked at getting on a financial plan, because we don't want you to lose in life and in retirement. Our entire process is called the SMSF Property Pathway, which has 3 basic steps: plan, buy, and grow. The plan stage is a non-negotiable. We'll go into this and property selection more in episode 2, but now let's just talk about that buyer's agency fee. A buyer's agent is a licensed professional who works for you to purchase property. In an SMSF deal, their role is critical and crucial. They don't just find you properties, they find compliant properties. They understand the single acquirable asset rule, meaning we know you can't buy a block of land and then borrow more money to build a house on it. They find off-market deals, they do all the due diligence, and they negotiate the best possible price down, and they manage the whole process so you don't accidentally break a super or ATO law. So what does that cost actually mean? So what is that cost? Fees vary, but you're generally looking at either a fixed fee between sort of $10,000 to $30,000 depending on the property, or a percentage fee usually between 1.5 and 3% of the purchase price depending on the agent you go for. For our $600,000 example, say a fixed fee is $20,000. A lot of people balk at this. They think, I can find a property myself. But this isn't an expense. It's an investment in not stuffing up. A good buyer's agent saves you from buying the wrong asset. They save you from overpaying, and most importantly, they save you from a compliance breach that could cost you 45% of your life's work in penalty taxes. When you weigh up a one-off fee of say $20,000 against a six-figure mistake or a permanent black mark on your fund, the value is incredibly clear. So finally, you have to factor in ongoing costs. Your SMSF is a business and it has running costs. Annual accounting and independent audit fees can come between $2,000 and $5,000 a year. There's the ATO's levy for the property itself. You have property management fees, landlord's insurance, council rates, and maintenance, of course, as well. All of these costs chip away at your rental income and have to be budgeted for. Pillar 2 is all about being financially prepared. It's about knowing the sticker price is not the real price. By mapping out every single cost you have, you can make sure your fund has the cash not only to buy the property, but to hold it for the long term. So we have two pillars: a realistic grasp on your borrowing capacity now and a full budget for all the costs associated with SMSF property. When investors fail, it's almost always because one or both of these pillars was built on shaky ground to start with. The first classic mistake is overestimating your borrowing power. Someone hears 80% LVR, finds a $700,000 property, and then thinks they can just need a $140,000 deposit. They spend weeks looking only to find out that because the apartment or the property is in a high density building, the lender will only approve 65%. Now they need $245,000 deposit and the dream is over. The fix is simple. Talk to an SMSF specialist, a buyer's agent or broker before you even start looking. Get a proper pre-assessment based on your fund's exact numbers. The second huge mistake is forgetting about the total costs. An investor has enough for the deposit, but they didn't budget for the $40,000 in stamp duty, the legal fees, the buffer in their account. They have to scramble, putting their fund under massive financial stress from day one. Or they buy the property but forget to account for ongoing $10,000 plus a year in administration, management and rates. Suddenly, their positively geared property is running at a cash loss and they're forced to sell at the worst possible time. Well, the fix: work with your accountant to build a detailed cash flow model, and before you buy, map out every single dollar. The third and most dangerous mistake is a compliance failure. This happens when people try to do it all themselves. To save a few bucks, they buy a residential property and let their cousin rent it on the cheap. That's a breach of the arm's length rule. The ATO finds out and bang, that's 45% gnarly tax is hit. Or they use borrowed money to add a deck, which the ATO calls an improvement, not a repair, and that's a huge violation of the LRBA rules. The solution is to accept that you're not the expert in everything. The most successful SMSF investors build a team of specialists, and which are a financial advisor, an SMSF accountant, a sharp mortgage broker, and an experienced buyer's agent and project manager. Your job is to be the CEO of the fund, not every single employee inside it. All right, let's put it all together. Today, we've laid down the two pillars of a successful SMSF property journey. Pillar one, your borrowing capacity. You know it's not a simple number. It's dedicated by strict LRBA rules, conservative LVRs that are usually capped at 80% for residential. The need for a strong rental income and loan terms that can affect your cash flow. And pillar two, the true cost of entry and ownership. You know that on top of your deposit, you need to budget for a mountain of other costs. You've got setup fees, you've got stamp duty, legal costs, loan fees, and the vital fees for all your specialist buyer's agent to keep you out of trouble, plus a buffer in case of any emergencies. Getting these two things right is the most important first step you can take. It's the difference between building a retirement powerhouse and building an expensive, stressful mess. So the logical next question is, where do I actually stand? Is this even a real option for my fund? I want to help you answer that question right now. So we've created a simple free tool to help you take that first step. It's called the free SMSF Property Quiz. It takes less than 60 seconds. You just answer 6 simple questions about your fund and your goals. Based on your answers, you'll get an instant eligibility report that gives you a rough idea of whether you're in a position to start this SMSF property journey or not. It's completely free, no obligation, and it's the fastest way to see if you're ready for your next stage of your SMSF retirement journey. Just go to the smsfpropertyguy.com.au/SMSF-property-quiz, and the link is in the description below or in the podcast notes. So check that out. Thank you for joining me for the very first episode of the SMSF Property Pathway. I'm your host, Jason McCall, the SMSF Property Guy. If this has helped clear some of the fog, please subscribe, because in episode 2, we're going to go into a bit more detail about myself, my journey, property selection, and some specific types of assets that actually work inside an SMSF. So thank you very much for having me. I believe in starts. The rest is inevitable. Take care, and we'll see you soon.